Hello, everyone. This is Gary O'Toole from timelineastrology.com, and this is the September 2023 sidereal forecast. So, September is usually a time of year when we get a lot more orderly, we get a lot more focused and deliberate in getting everything lined up. And we start to take stock of our lives and we start to see what's missing and see what could do with some improvement, and all of that is usually the case in September because the sun moves into sidereal Virgo. Planets like Mercury and Venus are not too far away and they usually move in there also. And so we get very picky also. And that's why Venus is not so suited to this, but Mercury is, because our mind likes order, essentially. But Venus, which is all about relations and enjoyment, doesn't. Let's face it. I mean, if everything has to be so until everything is perfect, you cannot enjoy yourself, then you're never going to enjoy anything. So that's why we have to think about these different qualities now in September in general. And I would say more especially because of all the retrogrades, it's just not your typical September anyway. So whatever it is you're doing, whatever you're planning, whatever you're lining up, make sure that you approach it differently. Try and think about it differently. Try and do it differently. It's just not your typical September. The only planet that is actually moving forward is Mars, and it's doing so in Virgo. So, in one way, yes, we do want to move forward and plan and have a strategy, and that's good, and you need to. But if you're not approaching it differently, the planets are just not at your back. They're not helping you out here. They're asking you to go back, review, reassess what you're doing. And at every point that you're doing something new, make sure that you recheck everything you're doing and double and triple check everything you're doing, in fact. And in a way, spend an inordinate amount of time in getting it right. You might have to spend so much more time than you think. And even then, you have to accept that it might not be completely right. And you say something, you do something, and it's like it's misconstrued or whatever. People don't understand it. Whatever it might be, keep an open mind about all of it. This is not a time to be that sort of exact and deliberate in that sense. It's a time to be deliberate about being open and adjust to everything as it comes. So it's like we need to hit the ground running in a way and be open to what comes our way and not know necessarily what is coming. But we need to also plan as much as we can. So don't maybe just think that, oh, okay, just let it all, throw it all up in the air and it's all like, I can't do anything now anyway with it. That would be a waste of this energy in a way, because there is definitely a time and a place for getting very strategic while also being really open to something new. So think about it. If you're sending the kids off to school again and you're getting back into a routine and you think, oh, wait a minute, do I need to actually do the same thing I normally do every year? Maybe I could change my routine. Maybe I could change the way I approach my work or my relationships or my whatever it is, fill in the blank. And maybe I could just do it differently. So that's what September is essentially about. And things I think are going to change in a big way in September because of many things. And I'll show you some of the transits now. So the first thing to say is that Venus is actually stationing direct by September 4th. So Mars is already moving forward. Now Venus is going to start to move forward. And so all of the reminiscing, all of the sort of reassessment of all of the things that we hold dear, all of the really important things to us, our values, all of that can come to a stop in a way, and we can start to move forward with it. Reminiscing is great for a time, but sometimes when we do that, we're not really present in our life and to the people who are in our life and appreciate those things and those people. And so now that Venus is moving forward, we can at least kind of get on board with that and say, okay, I've rethought this now, and maybe this is how I need to approach this relationship or this thing that I've been thinking about. And some people, of course, maybe have thought twice about it, and maybe they think maybe it's not worth it. Maybe I don't want to do this anymore. And maybe that's in a relationship, right? But conversely, maybe you've actually doubled down on what's important to you and you've actually recommitted to somebody, that actually it's a time for really focusing on your love, on the things you love. And now is the time to move forward with that thing because you've recaptured that spark or whatever it might be. So that's good news in one way, but I'll show you by the end of September, as Venus then moves back into Leo, crossing the juncture between Cancer and Leo, there's definitely a lot of complexity going on in terms of Venus related things that will sort of play out more dramatically, I would say, by October, November. And that, of course, also means the economy. So now we also have Jupiter on the same day Venus goes and stations direct. We have Jupiter station retrograde until the end of the year. This is definitely showing the sort of bubble that's been created in the economy and the rethink that has to happen around it. Jupiter retrograde, along with Rahu, which is always retrograde, according to the mean node calculation at least, they are together now in Aries. And that is essentially what's fueling the markets, the bubble that's in the markets. And it's essentially a bubble that's created because of the AI. That's it. It's only because of AI. If you take all of those companies, those big companies that are driving this AI tech revolution now, the Teslas, the Googles, the Meta, all of those big companies, if you take all of that away, I mean, there is no market bubble. But what happens with a bubble? A bubble bursts. It's going to burst eventually. And the timing of that, I'll show you in this video. And by the end of September, we really need to be mindful of that. But now as Jupiter retrogrades, it's this sort of, it's a reassessment of many things, including laws and policies that, have been in a way weaponized, I would say. When you think about how governments, and more obviously in the US now, we're seeing these laws like the indictments of Donald Trump as a good example of how laws can be weaponized. That's Jupiter in Aries. Now it's going retrograde, of course, is a whole review of that. But there's also a theme here, again, in terms of the economy, where this bubble that's been created, and everyone thinks that a bubble is just going to keep growing and growing. And that's what Rahu Jupiter tends to create, is this unreal, artificial, essentially. It's an artificial bubble. It's not real on the ground in a way. The economy is not reflecting what's going on in the markets. And the markets, like I said, by the end of September into the beginning of October is likely to go through a major, major adjustment, maybe even a crash. So, like I said, I'll show you that at the end of this video. But for now, think about what is important to you as Venus stations to go direct, who's important to you. Think about why you do anything you do. That's Jupiter retrograde in Aries. Think about the bubble that's been created in your own life in this sign Aries by house position, whatever is that sign is for you. And think about maybe needing to kind of bring that down to earth before it actually does crash by October. And so that's probably a better use of these retrogrades also, is that you don't want to have this kind of bubble in your own life where it's this really high expectation of something that then comes crashing down. It's probably best to adjust to this retrograde of Jupiter in a sense that you readjust your expectations. Now, I'm not saying that you should lower your expectations in that way. It's just you have to adjust your expectations. And therefore, you then maybe don't have to experience that crash later on in October. So that's Jupiter retrograde. The other thing about Jupiter retrograde, it's doing it in a section of the zodiac is really interesting because Mercury did it in the same exact section of the zodiac in April, May of this year. So that is from 21 degrees of sidereal Aries back to 11 degrees. So Jupiter will do this now, the exact same section of the zodiac, Mercury did so. So it's really more about asking ourselves why we do what we do, or why we did what we did, or why did that happen? And so Mercury here, previous April, May, think about that time, what was going on then. Even going back to last year, 2022, we had an eclipse in this section of the zodiac, and that really kicked everything off in terms of, for an example, the lunar mansion this occurs in is called Bharani, which is she who bears, and its symbol is the yoni, the vulva. So it's all about reproduction. And so reproductive rights is one obvious example of this. So the fact that Jupiter, which represents laws and policies, is going retrograde back over this juncture where the eclipse occurred last year is likely then to show a sort of reassessment of those laws. But again, look at it in your own chart and what these signs, the sign Aries in particular, represents for you, and what Jupiter represents for you more specifically. And then this review that you're going to be going through, and it's again an adjustment so that you don't have to have this big crash later on of all of your expectations. So that's Jupiter. Mars, as I mentioned, is the only planet moving forward from the beginning of the month. Venus will join it by the 4th, but Mars is really gung-ho about moving forward. And in Virgo, it kind of gets caught up in a lot of red tape, essentially. It doesn't really like to be in Virgo because Virgo is too exacting for it. However, just like with any transit, you can use it to your advantage. The best thing to do with this is to get really on it, to get really focused and deliberate in planning and strategy, and really keeping up an open mind about that at the same time, but planning it, really planning everything out and accepting at the same time that you're not going to be able to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. You're not going to be able to see every single thing, and accept that and be okay with it. Keep an open mind, keep a sense of humor, and keep going and keep planning and schedule and do all of that. Improve your life as much as you can, and try and do the best. However, try not to overdo it either, because this is one of the conundrums of Mars in Virgo, is that Mars is an energy that doesn't know when to quit already, but Virgo is a focused, sort of very deliberate, very exacting quality. And when you put Mars in Virgo, we don't know when to quit, and we actually make things worse oftentimes. So, for example, if there's a problem, that's Virgo, and you attack it head on, you might end up creating 10 more problems where there needn't be any problem at all. Because if you just left the problem for a time, you just let it go for a time, and you come back to it and you realize, actually, oh, that solved itself. Mars and Virgo tends not to do that. So just be really mindful of that. And if you have to do something, again, just do it differently. Keep an open mind about it and try to kind of know when to quit, essentially. This Mars in Virgo is going to be quite intense because of its aspect onto Jupiter, which I mentioned in Aries, and Rahu. It's strongly aspecting Aries. So we're going to see a lot of volatility in the world, continuation of the wildfires and all of that, of course, but also in the wars. We're going to see a lot more escalation there. Just a lot more of a sense of angst when people get very frustrated when they can't do what they want to do and plan what they want to plan. It's like everything is sort of backed up now, and it's getting really intense as all these planets sort of jostle around. And so they're not in the most comfortable relationship really in September, to be honest with you. But again, that's a great time for getting, you know, adjusted to it and using the energy to kind of do it differently, and try not to beat yourself up about things that don't work out as you had planned. But in terms of world affairs, this is likely a lot of escalation here in terms of fighting. Um, Next one then is Mercury itself, which is retrograde, which is why it makes Mars in Virgo more complicated, because it's 12 signs away in Leo and it's retrograde until the 15th of September. There is, of course, the fact that it's stationed to go direct. So it's not like it's stationing retrograde like in August, where everything feels backed up and it's not moving forward. This at least starts to feel like things are moving forward by mid-month. But of course, as with Mercury retrogrades, you have to be really slow and try not to be frustrated as things slowly turn around again and start to move forward again. But they will move forward by mid-month. And that's why I think the latter part of September, especially then as the sun, which goes into sidereal Virgo the day after Mercury stations, that is a better time for planning more strategically and more efficiently, being more effective in anything that you're doing. Until then, again, keep an open mind about what you're doing and how you're doing it. Try and think differently about how you're saying something, how you're communicating something. Try and think differently about yourself, even. Like, what am I about? What do I stand for? And how do I express myself? And can I do so more clearly, perhaps? Keep an open mind about all of this, I would say. Now, before I get into the actual charts and the new and full moons in September, which I think are important, especially the full moon at the end of the month, and I'll speak about why that is, I want to just mention this book that I'm releasing in September on the 15th, just as Mercury stations. And I'm doing so online for patrons. So that's Friday, the 15th of September at 9 p.m. British Standard Time. We'll have a meeting online, a launch party. Essentially, I'll invite my teacher, astrology teacher Pearl Finn. I'll invite other astrologers and just everybody to maybe just share their experiences of their timeline, or just listen to our own experiences of these timing techniques from India. So Dasha Vidya is the name of the book, Timelines of Indian Astrology. They are essentially all of the timing techniques that we use in Indian or Vedic astrology, apart from transits. They are essentially the meat and bones of your chart. It shows what is happening. The transits are the triggers, absolutely, for events, but they also are, as we've seen with all of these transit reports, they're general in nature until you can actually apply it to a particular chart. And it's the dashas, these circumstances, essentially what that word means. It's the circumstances we find ourselves in that are more relevant to our life, not the transits. So the transits are like the top layer, the skin, whereas the meat and bones are dashas. So I hope you can join me as a patron, and you can actually sign up as a patron for a 7-day free trial without paying anything. Otherwise, it will just be $5 by the 15th of September. But even if you want to sign up before the 15th on the 7-day free trial, you can still join the meeting, and we'll gather and celebrate this launch of this book. I'll also be in Dublin for those that are in Dublin on this weekend from Friday, September 15th until Sunday, September 17th at the RDS Arena in Dublin, where I'll be launching the book, and I'll have copies there also. So I hope you can join me. Let's get on with the rest of this forecast. So we have the new moon on the 15th of September. That's an important time, a turning point, because Mercury stations direct. The sun is about to move into Virgo then after, and then we have a full moon by the end of the month on September 29th, which again, I think is an important time, not because of the full moon itself necessarily, but what happens after the full moon. Actually, pretty much immediately after this full moon, that I think is going to shake up the world economy in a big way, and the world in many, many ways. So let's first of all, though, look at the new moon on September 15th. So this is the new moon at 27 degrees of sidereal Leo. Mercury is about to station direct on this day. And actually, the new moon itself is at 27 degrees of Leo, which is actually where Mercury stationed retrograde by August 23rd. So this is interesting because it's actually showing that there's a new start here based on the things that we've already done. Like there's a whole rethinking that's going on here about what we're doing and what we're about, essentially, which is what Leo's about. Who am I? Who am I really? What am I about? And how can I effectively communicate what I'm about? And how do I share my gifts, my talents? How do I shine my light? Essentially, that's what Leo's all about. So a new moon in Leo, and especially the latter part of Leo, which is this lunar mansion, Uttara Falguni, which is the latter fruitful one. It's very much about dividing everything up. It brings us into Virgo, where it's mostly placed in. And it's all about, again, taking stock. So you've done something, you've put it out there. A good example, for example, would be my book. I've created this book, I've written this book, and now I'm putting it out there, and now it's about taking stock. So how did this work? Does this work? Does that work? Do people understand that section or this section? And it's going to be a whole process, obviously, during this period. But again, if you don't know what you stand for to begin with, and thinking about the Jupiter stationing retrograde in a trine to this new moon, if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then when you get bogged down in the details, you probably get tripped up on all of the details that it's kind of like you might not be able to see the wood for the trees kind of thing. So again, backing it up, what are you about and why do you do anything that you do? And then all of the details can be worked out subsequently. They're not as important really. I mean, they are important, obviously, but not as important as why and who are you? Why do you do anything you do? So I think that's an important thing to think about. And also thinking about issues or themes of commitment. This is a big theme of Uttara Falguni. It's one of the more auspicious lunar mansions for sure. It's a great one for marriage, even though I wouldn't advise anyone to get married on a new moon necessarily. It's not necessarily the most auspicious day to start something. It's a dark moon, but it is a great time to set intentions for sure. And so thinking about that in terms of commitment, not just to other people, but to ourselves, to our own lives. What am I going to commit to now? I know myself now. I know I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to commit myself to this. And I know why I'm doing this. So now I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow through on this subsequently. So this is a great time to think about these things because Mercury is going to station direct now and it's going to help you. The wind now is at your back. And so it's going to help you move forward with your plans, whatever it is that you're focused on. Saturn opposite is going to help you focus in on it even more, maybe even put the blinkers on where it might feel a bit too restricted at some points, but it is a great focusing mechanism, Saturn. I wanted to mention also about the And as I mentioned, the full moon at the end of the month, in terms of what could happen directly after that, in terms of the economy, I do think that Saturn in Aquarius, aspecting these planets here in Leo, including Venus, which is about to return to Leo, and the planets here in Aries, strongly aspects Aries, Leo, and Scorpio with its placement here in Aquarius. I do think Saturn, in a way, is almost in a way our saving grace, which is very strange to say about Saturn. But in a way, if we didn't have Saturn here, I think things could have got really out of hand. And in a way, Saturn is restraining things, is restricting things so that it doesn't get too out of hand. In other words, for example, the bubble, the markets. I mean, I think without Saturn's influence here, it could have got really crazy, and that could have led to an even more severe crash. So it might mean that we don't have as severe a crash as we would have seen otherwise, but there still is a crash coming, and I'm going to show you that now after the full moon. So the full moon is on September 29th, Uttara Bhadrapada, another ladder sign, a twin sign. Uttara is a ladder, and Bhadrapada is auspicious steps. So it's the lunar mansions that the Purva, the former Bhadra, is in Aquarius, bridges Aquarius and Pisces, and then Uttara Bhadrapada, the latter auspicious steps, is entirely within the sign sidereal Pisces. Pisces is getting into the depths of something, is committing to something, also committing to our path, our spiritual path also, but also letting go more than anything. Because when we think about this Bhadrapada, it's auspicious because it's about letting go. It's not about attaching at this stage. It's about surrender. And this is more especially because Saturn's association with this lunar mansion. It's also because Moon in Pisces anyway is about that. So just learning to let go a little bit more. And again, it balances out the tendencies of Virgo, where we can see the sun here now and Mars almost finished up in, where we might get too sort of on it and actually create more problems than we solve. And if we were just to leave that for a while and just surrender it and allow it to be whatever it is, then actually it all works out. So finding a balance between Virgo and Pisces for this full moon on September 29th would be really important. But also in terms of bigger themes that are about to get really activated right now, because this in a way is kind of like a pivot, I think, a time to let go, to surrender whatever is happening in the coming weeks and months that I think is going to be quite traumatic. First of all, we have Venus, which is almost finished with Cancer and is going to cross over this juncture between Cancer and Leo. That's already a volatile period. Then you can see here Mars is almost done with Virgo. It's going to cross over into Libra and then join Ketu by October 5th. That is the pin to this bubble that's been created in the markets. So again, however extreme that is, there is a sort of deflation going on or a bubble bursting going on. But subsequent to that, Venus goes into Leo, of course, then it's opposite Saturn, so it's restrained there. But then it goes into Virgo in November. So October it's in Leo, and then November it's in Virgo. By that stage, Ketu will have moved into Virgo and can join it by the end of November. So I'll talk more about that in future videos, but that's essentially the sort of the low ebb. And then, of course, that means Rahu goes into Pisces, where we have this full moon on September 29th and join Neptune. That is not just a bursting the bubble, that's a bursting the bubble and then like what the hell is going on sort of thing. That's a very confusing time that's coming up with Rahu and Neptune in Pisces. And so we're going to see a lot of confusing things happen potentially over the next, well, many months, but starting out from the end of September. Rahu in Pisces will also continue to aspect Jupiter in Aries, which continues to retrograde throughout the end of the year. So we're just, again, likely to see a lot of setbacks in terms of the growth in the economy. And again, in the markets is another big one. So again, if you're heavily invested, think about these very complicated transits that are coming up and, you know, use the transits what they're good for, which is a reassessment and reevaluation of all of these things that we value, but also doing things differently and thinking outside the box, and try not to just get stuck in a rut or stuck in a typical routine that you normally do in September. Try and shake it up for yourself, and that will be in alignment with the planets. And whatever comes out of this, again, I would say more than anything, thinking about actually behind it all, this Ketu, this significator of this sense of this, the still center, that stillness within us, that is never perturbed by anything that's happening without. The changes can go on, ups and downs in the markets. It doesn't matter. There's a part of us that is looking on that is not affected by any of it. And that would be a good time, therefore, to focus on that, to be still, in other words, to do what you need to do and to plan and to, get all of your ducks in a row, but then also just be still with it. You've done what you can, you've done all you could do, then just be still. That's my advice for September, because I think is going to feel like a very busy, busy time. So that is September 2023. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe so you can get more. And also the sign forecasts. I'll go into each sign and how they are impacted by the transits for September. If you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to post below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And again, consider joining the 7-day free trial on patreon.com/timeline astrology. This is I call the Scorpio Video Club. I share secrets of Vedic astrology and also that upcoming book launch on the 15th of September and so much more. I post daily from Monday to Friday for our patrons, and I have monthly reports based on these transits. I write an in-depth report for patrons. We have a monthly discussion group where we join and we talk about the transits for the month and so much more. So think about joining up. It's patreon.com/timeline astrology. So thank you so much for listening to this all the way through to the end. I wish you all of the very best for the month ahead, and until next time.